Hey, my name is Ishan and I'm a Waterloo computer science student. I'm in my third year and I entered Waterloo in 2021, so I was a 2021 applicant. I'm going to be explaining how I got into Waterloo computer science, my grades, my AIF, and my overall extracurriculars that got me into the program. So, how hard is it to get into Waterloo computer science? Well, the acceptance rate in my year was about 4.66%. There were 7,500 different applicants and 350 different spots. Because of this, it means that it was extremely competitive, and people say arguably it's the best computer science program in Canada and the hardest computer science program in Canada to get into. So what's the number one factor in getting into Waterloo computer science? Well, it's definitely not working at Google or getting a research internship at an Ivy League university or even getting the highest score in the Waterloo math contest. In fact, even if you have all those things, you still have a high probability of not getting in because of this number one factor. The number one factor of getting into Waterloo computer science above everything else is grades. They won't even look at your application or they won't consider it seriously if your average isn't above 90-ish. So it says on their website they need about low to mid 90s, but in my year, according to the spreadsheet I have here, the average was about 96% for people who got in. Now, my own grades, I had a 95.6% average. I had a 92 in English, I had a 96 in advanced functions, a 94 in calculus and vectors. I also had a 97 in computer science, 99 in religion, and a 94 in data management, meaning my overall average was about 95.6%. Now, importantly, you need to make sure that your math marks are very high because they really realistically only require advanced functions and calculus and vectors and English, obviously. Now, those 3 marks have to be maximized as much as possible because the other 3 are honestly just filler marks and you can just fill them with easy courses if you really need to. The main thing Waterloo cares about is having really high grades in your math courses, and if you take computer science, ideally a high grade in computer science as well. Those courses are high indicators of performance in Waterloo because we have very difficult math courses. Courses like Math 135 and Math 239, they're so difficult that they need to make sure that people have really high grades in math courses and that they can handle the course load here. One other thing to note is that Waterloo doesn't really care about AP or IB courses. I personally just have a regular high school diploma, and honestly, if you take AP and IB courses, you need to watch out for the risk of having lower grades. Because realistically, if I have a 96 average in a regular high school diploma and someone else has a 92 average in an IB school diploma, they will still not really care about the programs themselves and they'll care way more about the average overall. So just, be considerate of the risks of taking advanced courses. Waterloo unfortunately won't let me list my AF here on the screen, but I am actually allowed to list my extracurriculars and explain what was in my application. So just for overall background, I actually got a $10,000 math scholarship and I got an early admission 1 month earlier than most applicants. So you could say overall my extracurriculars are very strong and your extracurriculars don't have to be this good to get in. So my extracurriculars are listed here. I was a researcher at a Harvard University lab. I was also a researcher at a lab here at the University of Waterloo. I'm currently in the E7 building, so a couple floors down, there's the Social and Intelligent Robotics Research Lab, which I was researching at. I was also part of the National First Canada Youth Council, which is basically just FIRST Robotics, but a youth council organization to help organize events across the country for FIRST Robotics. I was also part of a FIRST Robotics team, Team 2706 in Ottawa. I was part of a program called SHAD. Some of you may have heard about SHAD. SHAD definitely boosts your admission chances because they do have a direct connection to the University of Waterloo, and SHAD was founded by the University of Waterloo. Arguably though, just SHAD is a bit expensive, so if you're not interested in there's easier ways to get in basically. Don't worry too much about SHAD if you didn't do SHAD. I was also vice president of my high school. I also went skydiving. That was another thing I did. I was team captain for Relay for Life. I was part of school band. I was part of a charity for COVID-19 to help people without masks. And one other thing to note here is that these extracurriculars need to have a bit of a structure. So what they're looking for in these extracurriculars is realistically, they only care about your top 5. If you ever apply to the States, to Ivy League schools, you'll notice that they actually only let you have 5 extracurriculars. Here at Waterloo, they let you list all of them, and feel free to list all your extracurriculars. But realistically, they're actually only going to look at your top 5 or so, because your top 5 extracurriculars is more than enough to explain what you're interested in and what you've done in high school. So you can see I kept rambling on a bit earlier about all my extracurriculars, but realistically the things that got me in were my research internships at universities, being part of leadership and student council, being part of FIRST Robotics, helping the community, and going skydiving. Now, make sure you don't ramble on too much on a bunch of extracurriculars. Try to just focus on some main ones and make sure you show a lot of depth. Now, if you're working on an extracurricular in grade 12, it's fairly impressive. But if you've been working on something since grade 9, make sure to show that, because it's a huge deal if you've been working on something for 4 years, rather than just starting something in grade 12 clearly for admission applications. Now, obviously, most people do these things in grade 11 and 12 for admission applications, but if you remember anything you did since grade 9, make sure to list it, because that's actually going to be a higher priority than stuff you've done recently, because it shows that you care about it more, and most likely you've had a higher impact in that space. So for me, that was first robotics. I've been part of first robotics since I was very young, grade 9-ish, and I kind of listed that as a very high priority because I've been doing that for a very long time, versus some other things like Relay for Life, which I did way more recently and didn't make as much of an impact. So in terms of my own employment, I had a computer science job as a project consultant at a company called MBS Systems Inc. I got this job through my first robotics team. One of our sponsors ended up hiring high school interns, so I was a bit lucky about that. If you get lucky or you hear about any of these high school internship opportunities, definitely make sure to hop on them. Besides that, I was a camp counselor at First Robotics Canada, so I was just helping around with some First Robotics camps. And lastly, I was a peer tutor, so I just helped around in my high school. I was a peer tutor. I was able to offer other people, advice and guide them through math and computer science courses. So you can see these kind of employment portions are actually even more important than extracurriculars, arguably, because they show a lot of dedication and it shows actual experience in computer science and software. Make sure you try to list a software job if you have one, and try to get a software job if you can, because it's extremely important. And realistically, when you enter here in Waterloo, everyone's trying to find a job. And having job experience is way more important than grades or extracurriculars. Like, realistically, being part of First Robotics is nice, but if you've been part of like a software job and worked somewhere and gotten paid to do software development, that's an even bigger factor to get a job here in the co-op program, and obviously it means that it's a bigger factor to get into University of Waterloo as well. So just try to be considerate of jobs. Even jobs like camp counselor, as I mentioned earlier, and peer tutor are very, very impressive, and try to do these jobs if you can. All right, the last section they ask for is your achievements. Honestly, I think your achievements kind of intertwine with your extracurriculars. For example, I was part of First Robotics, and my team ended up going to Worlds one year, so I listed that. Besides that, one other achievement I had was I had a 97th percentile score on the SATs, so I listed that as a overall math contest score. I was also part of the Waterloo Computer Science contest, so I listed all those honor roll achievements. Feel free to just list whatever achievements you have. Obviously, with most important to least important, and like I said earlier, honestly, your top 5 most important achievements are way more important than all your other achievements. Realistically, I think they'll only look at your top 5, or they'll only care mostly about your top 5. And try to make these achievements more recent if possible. Realistically, if you've done something 4 or 5 years ago, it is impressive, but if you did something 1 or 2 years ago and got an achievement in that, that's more recent and it proves recent qualifications. In this section, make sure to list all the Waterloo math contests and the Waterloo computer science contests you've done. Even if you got honor roll, or even if you didn't get any achievement at all, even a certificate of participation, make sure to list it in this achievement section. Waterloo really cares about you doing their contests, and it really makes a difference in admissions in general. If you have someone who has a 96 average and has the exact same score as someone else who has a 96 average, and they have the exact same extracurriculars, the deciding factor will be whether or not they did the Waterloo contests for math and computer science. So make sure to take it. It really makes a difference. And just think about it as the university, right? If you're the University of Waterloo and you're making all these contests for kids in high school, and you have someone who didn't do the contest versus someone who did do the contest, you can see the person who did the contest has slightly more interest in the university, and you'd obviously give admission to someone who's more likely to be interested in the university and who's actually helping you out by taking these contests. So ideally, just try to take every Waterloo math contest you can, every computer science contest you can, and try to list it here as an achievement as possible, because they really care about you doing it. Importantly also, if you can try to get a high score like honor roll or so on, that'd be very nice as well. Personally, I got an honor roll on the CCC Junior, so not very impressive, but still something to note. This flag just fell very sadly. Lastly, make sure that you list every single thing you possibly can. If any section is optional, if any section is not required, make sure you do it, because with 7,500 different applicants, you need to find every single possible way to stand out. Another important thing to note is try to be a bit unique if you can. Now, if you think about it, with 7,500 different people applying and these people reading all these different applications, for every 19 people rejected, 1 person is accepted. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that your application stands out. Now I talked to a lot of different people, and many different people, especially here in the engineering building, they all list the story about how they started using Legos when they were a child, or how they started using, some kind of building blocks, or started programming when they were young. Everyone's using the same story, so try to make a different story if you can. Personally, the way I was trying to stand out is I tried to use my research internships and talking about how I did research in high school. I also tried to talk about the First Robotics Youth Council and more on the community side initiatives. One other thing that I really tried to highlight was my skydiving and my kind of boldness of being vice president of my high school. Something memorable that they could trace back to you specifically, rather than just a generic story that you've probably made up, or a story that's honestly not even unique. Like, even if you made up the story, hundreds of people are using the exact same story as you. So at least try to make these stories unique and try to make them truly you. Honestly, that'll make you stand up more, and it'll make it more entertaining, or more, I'd say, useful for people to actually read and find why you versus why someone else. So those are my overall tips. So importantly, make sure you have high grades. Grades is the #1 factor. If you have to choose between getting a high grade in a math course and doing some random extracurricular, make sure you take the grades. I know that extracurricular seems useful, but realistically, without the high grades, they won't even look at the extracurricular. The other thing is, make sure that your extracurriculars are very good after you have high grades, because these extracurriculars will make sure that you actually stand out between another 95 average and yourself. And lastly, make sure that you have a very strong employment if possible. It's possible you don't have employment, I think that's okay. But if you do, it really does help stand out. Overall, those are my tips. And one last thing I'd really like to highlight is that Waterloo Computer Science isn't the only way to go to Waterloo. There's some other programs that are a bit easier to get into, or have different admissions processes that you could try to apply to. Particularly, some programs are like CFM, there's software engineering, there's mechatronics engineering, system designs engineering. All these have different admissions processes, and I have friends who've gotten into software engineering but haven't gotten into computer science, and I have friends who've gotten into computer science like myself, and I haven't gotten into software engineering. But realistically, we all end up taking the same courses. CFM, same thing. There's people in CFM who haven't gotten into computer science, but realistically, we take the exact same courses, so honestly, who cares? And a lot of these people end up only applying to computer science, getting rejected, and then just forgetting about Waterloo. But I'd really highly advise you to look into the other computer science programs here at Waterloo, because realistically, we end up taking a lot of the same courses. And if I'm applying to a job on Waterloo Works that says Google, and someone else is inside and applying to the same job on Waterloo Works on Google, the employer honestly doesn't care that much between these different programs. Realistically, all they care about is your past work experience and your grades. And in that sense, you know what I mean? You still got into Waterloo, it's just a different program, who cares? Overall, I'd say that, try your best, but it is very heavy on luck. So, even me, I credit a lot of me getting into Waterloo as luck. And I'd just say, maximize your chances by applying to as many Waterloo programs as possible, both engineering and math. And even if you don't get into Waterloo, I'd encourage you to look into programs like U of T, UBC, McGill. There's programs in the States. And I think computer science is one of those fields where it doesn't really matter what school you go to. Realistically, if you go work at Google, everyone gets the same interview. The main thing is, obviously, in the beginning, going somewhere like Waterloo does make a bit of a difference. But if you look 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if I'm 25 or 26, going to Waterloo won't make as much of a difference as your past work experience, especially in computer science. And something like law or medicine or business, those programs, it matters more which school you go to. But something like computer science, I mean, some of the smartest people I've met didn't go to Waterloo, they just went to random schools, right? So it doesn't make as much of a difference, and it matters more about what you build. And overall, I'd say try to apply to as many programs as Waterloo as possible. But at the same time, your main goal is to try to work somewhere like Google or make something, like your own startup, and Waterloo isn't the only path to get there. Overall, I thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to create more videos for all of you soon. Bye!